Hello and welcome back to another Long Live Rock and Roll podcast episode with your host, Laz Felipe on this side, and on the other side of the screen, Mr. Felipe Amorim. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, Ben. Hello, everyone. How you doing, brother?
Good, very well. It's good. I mean, I think the YouTube audiences will notice our backgrounds. Look at them.
Yeah, we're like more professional now.
Yeah, we're trying to shake
the album cover and all that stuff.
And look at my mic right in front of me. We're shaking things up a bit. We're trying to, we're taking this. Not that we weren't taking it seriously before, but we are full on now. Yeah, so expect some nice new visual and hopefully oral changes in the next few weeks as well. So
exactly, we've invested a few £1 million on technology and.
We had a budget to make an album, but we thought, fuck it, we'll just make our screens look better, get better cameras and everything. But anyway, here we are back with another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. So before we crack on, make sure you like, subscribe, and do all the normal stuff on social media. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. Give us a like, a comment, and it will help us indefinitely. So thanks for that.
Download a few episodes as well, isn't it?
That's Felipe's found the hack. That's right. Felipe's found the hack. Our numbers go up if you download each of our episodes. Even if you've listened, downloading one does our numbers. So
download the ones you're not going to listen to as well. Just
why not? It helps us. There we go. So this week we are doing an album that I actually chose. And we are doing Hysteria by Def Leppard. So some quick facts. It was released 3rd of August 1987, recorded between February 1984 and January 1987. That is a long record time. Recorded across Netherlands, Dublin and Paris. It lasts 2 minutes over 1 hour. The label was Phonogram, and the genres, again, another topic which I'm sure we'll get into. We've got glam metal, hard rock and pop rock. Are the genres loosely associated with it. Produced by Robert John Lange, who had the nickname Mutt. And this is the crazy part. 7 singles from the album. Animal, Women, Pour Some Sugar, Hysteria, Armageddon It, Love Bites, and Rocket. Let's just go straight into that, man. 7 singles.
7 singles, right?
7 singles. Let me just quickly say the dates they were released, okay? July 87, Aug 87, September 87, November 87, March 88, July 88, and January 1989. So over the course of 18 months, 7 singles from one album. That's kind of crazy, isn't it, Felipe?
It is crazy, and that's not the only ridiculous number about the album. So this, was their 4th album, so they were like successful at the time, but. It sold 20 million copies worldwide, 12 million in America alone. And it charted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and the UK albums chart. So that's like, and the other interesting thing is it cost a total of £5 million in production, which was a lot of money at the time.
I remember them saying they had to sell 5 million copies to break even.
To break even. There you go. Exactly. So that was a lot of money, and if they didn't sell, they that would be a big problem with the label. But they sold a lot more than that.
Yeah, thank God.
I think before we started recording, we're talking about the producer, and you just mentioned his name, Mutt Lange, and he is a big part of the success of the album, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think he was writing songs with the band and helping with the production. He even left the production for a while to do the album with the Cars, I guess, and then he came back and finished the album with them. And there are loads of reasons why it took that long to finish, isn't it?
Yeah. So just a bit of background. It was, as I mentioned, the recording times. It was a 3-year process. To record, execute, and produce this album. In 1984, Mutt Lange pulled out of producing. The album was actually titled, the working title was called Animal Instinct. They actually left Hysteria until later, and they were going to go with Animal Instinct. He was replaced by Jim Steinman, who we know produced Bat Out of Hell, and you wanted to talk about him a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, because he was he didn't actually produce Bat Out of Hell, or he didn't do the sound engineering part of it, the mixing of it. They wanted someone who was capable of mixing and mastering and getting the sound they wanted. And he was more like a songwriter for Meatloaf, other than the producer.
Yes, you're right.
And that was the issue they had with him, because he wouldn't be technical enough. They wanted someone to be more technical. He was more artistic, and so they were not happy with him, so they had to let him go.
Yeah,
And
they
then
clashed. They clashed a bit, didn't
yeah,
they, over some
yeah,
songwriting? So he left. Jim Steinman. Essentially, what he did is he wanted a more theatrical and polished, pristine album. Kind of more. I think theatrical is the best word. If you've just come from
yeah,
doing an album with Meatloaf, you're
yeah,
going to want something a little theatrical.
yeah.
So he was ousted from the project with the drums and bass only done on roughly on 7 songs. So
And
out of
that's
the
after
12
like
songs,
after
sorry, go on.
3 months of production, isn't it? They only
Yes.
had bass and drums for a few songs.
So it was a long process. Things weren't going well. The first producer left, Jim Steinman came in. And then, to make things worse, in New Year's Eve 1984, Rick Allen lost his arm in a car accident. Now, do you want to talk about Rick Allen? Because
Yeah, yeah. So this
a
is a
drummer,
story. Like,
with
yeah,
one arm, that's pretty special.
exactly. It's really, really special, and it's amazing. Also, like, it's one of those stories in rock and roll that's been told a million times. So I don't want to
Yeah.
like just add to that, like, and say, or basically just say the same stuff that everyone has said.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, yeah, he lost his arm. Everyone knows about that story. It's the most famous story related to Def Leppard, but.
And drummers.
And drummers in general, yeah, exactly. And it's remarkable how he kept going this and finished the album. It's not like they had a long break and started something new. I think they were already working on the album, and
Mm-hmm.
they had to adapt the whole drum kit. So basically, anyone can find this on YouTube. There's videos of his drum tech explaining how the kit works, and it's completely different than a normal acoustic drum kit. It's mainly electric, and it's like he's got loads of triggers, which means like he's got pedals that when he steps on a pedal, you have the floor tom sound or the snare sound. Or
It's much more electronic, isn't it?
It's much more
Yeah.
electronic.
So
I think it's got about 6 pedals or something like.
So if
apart from
for people who don't know about triggers, if the pedal like even slightly touches the skin, the electronic trigger is activated, and even if he just touches it tinily, a big snare sound could hit.
Yeah,
so
or you
triggers.
can also have different levels, etc. But basically, yeah, when you touch the pedal or the pad, what you're gonna have is a pre-recorded sound that's gonna be triggered by the pedal or the drumstick. So basically, he had to do that to replace everything he was doing with his left arm. So his left arm was mainly replaced by the motions he was doing with his left foot on the pedal. So like basically, he had to relearn how to play drums from scratch, which is insane. And the drums are a big part of the album. I think the sound of the album is so like
rock
based,
stadium.
yeah, exactly. And they have what we call the big drum sound, which is when you record drums in a big room, there's loads of reverb. You can either do that in a big room, or you can just add that as an effect as post-production. But they had this massive drum sound, some of it electronic, some of it acoustic. And I think the drums are like essential to the sound of the album, and they probably the most remarkable part of the arrangements. And it's all very simple in a certain way. It's all very groovy, which reminds me a lot of AC/DC. So, it's about keeping the beat, but it's phenomenal drum sound throughout the album. It sounds a bit old when you listen to it now. It sounds a bit too 80s.
Yeah.
But still,
that was one of my biggest complaints about the album. I mean, you'll hear my opinion on at the end, obviously, but my issue is that I don't feel it ever really finds a home. I don't ever really feel, it's so obviously influenced by the glam metal that has come in years before. Yeah, at the same time, it's got that big stadium rock sound, but it's got pop music, choruses, and melodies.
Yeah.
And so I find I struggle to, and listen, I'm the first person that when we do all these episodes and you hear me say, oh, they've blended this genre with that genre, I appreciate it, and I really will sort of give credit where it's due. But for me, it just never felt like it really found a home. It was too poppy in places. It was not heavy enough in others. It was like a bit too stadium rock in other places. And I think the long 3-year recording process was probably a factor in that. Because how can you keep a vibe and an attitude and a form of expression going for 3 years. I mean, think how much your taste in, let's say, movies. Your taste in movies. You might fancy watching horror movies for 6 months, and then you're going to go on to some dramas for another 6 months, and some war movies. If that's how simple things like our taste in music, movies, and I don't know, comic books work, how are emotions going to be? Because emotions are forever changing.
Yeah.
And to have to
And
go
if you're writing songs
recording,
over those years and all those years, like your life is changing, in many
exactly,
ways.
yeah, and the I mean the whole what word am I looking for? The whole bed of glam metal changed so drastically but between 1984 and 1987. And I'm using glam metal because I know people will probably call this pop rock, hard rock, glam rock even, but Def Leppard. It's important to know that Def Leppard's first two albums had traditional heavy metal elements.
Yeah.
So your dual lead guitars, and just sort of in the production as well. Sometimes it was quite dark to listen to. Pyromania, the album before this, had traces of traditional heavy metal, but the kind of the glam feeling was coming in now. Glam metal took over the focus of heavy metal as a broad, big genre like jazz or classical music or rock music. Heavy metal as a genre, the focus went over to America in 1983 because glam was taking over. MTV were playing all the videos and everything, and it was born and died very quickly. It sort of came over in 1983 when sort of bands like Judas Priest and Def Leppard brought it over from England, brought the heavy metal over from England and showed what you could do. You had lots of stuff going on in the underground scene of heavy metal, thrash, death metal, but glam was the forefront. And very quickly, by 1987, we had Guns N' Roses, who were overseeing the change from the bright spandex, crazy hair, wild makeup. That was glam metal. They took it towards dirty hair metal, where you lost the outfits, you lost the pizzazz, the makeup, and everything, and people started taking it more seriously because
It's
people
more
started,
about the music than the visuals.
yes, because people started taking glam not seriously. People saying, "My God, look at these losers!" And this is a 3 or 4 year period. So people like Guns N' Roses then came in and started saying, "Well, we're going to dress normally. We're still going to make glammy kind of music, but we're going to take ourselves more seriously." And in those 3 years, the whole the whole network of glam metal has changed. And Def Leppard have gone from preparing to record an album to losing a producer, to losing another producer, to the drummer losing an arm, to having to re-record parts again. And I just think it must have been a crazy process. I mean, what do you think?
Well, what I think is, what are the odds of coming out of all that madness and chaos with a decent album? It's just like just coming out of that with an album that sounds acceptable would be a miracle. So what they did is insane, because, like, as I said, with everything in the music scene changing over the years, and with all the personal traumas and all the delays they had, chances are you're going to have a really, really bad album at the end of that. But
The likelihood,
yeah, I think the producer plays a big role in that. I think the fact that he managed to find the sound they were looking for. There's something they said something about him. Mutt, isn't it? They said that he wouldn't accept an okay song, so they came up with something like, "Oh, here, check this song out," and it would be like, "Well, the vocals are great, but everything else is just average. So we're gonna work around the vocals and make everything else as great as the vocals." So he was famous for saying, "This is okay, but we're not doing okay. Everything has to be great, every single song." And he came up with the concept of 7 singles. So we're going to have
Really?
7 singles out of this album. It's going to be the hard rock version of Thriller. So Thriller was a big hit, big commercial success by Michael Jackson. He wanted to bring that concept from pop music to rock. You can even claim that this album is more pop than rock. But what makes it rock for me is the amount of guitars. They like endless layers of guitars. And that's another concept they came up with, which is like, we don't have a lead and rhythm guitar. Most bands with two guitar players, they have one guy playing rhythm, the other guy doing solos and riffs, and what we call the lead guitar.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be like an orchestra. They wanted the guitars to work with voicings and arrangements, not like there's two different melodies going on guitar. It's not rhythm and lead. That's a really, really clever thing. And that's one of the best parts of the album, I guess.
And that's a characteristic that they brought over from their heavy metal roots. You know, you don't really have a lead and a rhythm in heavy metal. You know, I think if you look at bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica, yes, they have lead guitarists who take the solos, but the quality, you've got to be as proficient playing the lead parts as you've got to be on the rhythm parts as well. But yeah, you know, I think that's an important thing what you said about they set out to make a rock version of Thriller.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much influence they actually took from the pop side of Michael Jackson, because even one of the songs, which one is it? Hysteria. I thought even towards the end where the voices, they're doing like a little call and response thing. And that sounds like Michael Jackson backing vocals. Don't you think?
Yeah. It does. It does. I actually want to ask you if you can hear the influences in there. Now, like, obviously, you have the pop stuff like Michael Jackson. You can say that's even part of it. But apparently, they were looking for a perfect mix of Queen and AC/DC. Does that make sense to you?
Well, that's really funny you say that, because when I was thinking of describing it, I'll just say it now. You hear it in my monologue. I didn't really enjoy the album, but my job on this podcast is to give an unbiased, objective, was it subjective? Whichever one. Objective view. Yeah, there we go. An objective, unbiased view. So that's my job, and that's what I'm always here to do. But I kind of felt like, you know, I listened to elements from their first three albums, and it's funny you mentioned Queen, because Queen had that moment where they kind of changed and went from being a rock band to a pop band, where synthesizers and keyboards became more prominent. And funnily enough, we spoke
electronic
about it,
drums as well, stuff like that.
And we spoke about it in the Genesis episode. Genesis did the same thing. They were like a prog rock band through much of the 70s, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, and into the 80s. And then by the 90s, Genesis were like a pop band.
You can say the same about Fleetwood Mac. They were like more like a blues rock band.
Absolutely. So this has happened before. Yeah. And I think, I don't want to say they're chasing fame and money, but you go which way the market dictates.
Yeah.
And with the rise of glam, put it this way, I'll sum up my opinion by something that you said. I don't know if we said it before we started recording or now during the recording, but to me, the album feels outdated. Yeah. It's got elements of glam that sort of became a bit stale by 85, 86. It's got some heavy metal in there. I think it could have done with more. I'm biased. I'm a metalhead. And it's got pop in there, lots of choruses and melodies. It felt like if this album had come in 1984, when they intended originally to have it, you could look at this and say, wow, like glam metal album of the decade.
It would kind of belong to that year.
But
maybe more. But yeah.
Can I just say quickly, when you think that the same year this was released, we got Appetite for Destruction, to me, it just feels like that they were just late to the party.
Yeah.
And I don't say that critically.
But still, they sold a lot. So that means people were still up to listen to that kind of music.
Absolutely. And who am I? You know, all I'm doing is giving my opinion. Who am I to say they should have done this or done that? But that is just my opinion. But I think it's just funny because it slots so perfectly musically in with like a 1983 or 1984 glam metal album. And I don't feel like it slots in historically with something like Appetite for Destruction, which was just a bit more mature, took itself a little more seriously. But that's just an observation. You know, it was released whenever it was released. There was there's nothing anyone could do about that. But to take it back to production, I have to say that is a fantastic part of it, because every song, the instruments are just crystal clear, and the effects on it it is perfectly produced. Do you agree?
Yeah, it is. And they have at some points 4 to 8 guitar tracks running at the same time.
Yep.
And for me, it doesn't sound like it's too much. I usually don't like more than like 3, 4 guitars at the same time. Sometimes I have way more than that, and it just works because I think the best choices they've made in every song is the use of spaces. And they talk about it a lot when you see any interviews you see with the band where they're talking about it. Like they say that Pour Some Sugar on Me, that song, they wanted the backbeat, which is that snare on beats 2 and 4 that we hear, is where, when people are supposed to clap their hands with the song, which doesn't necessarily happen.
Yeah,
some people clap on 1 and 3, but what basically every time they play in the riff, they leave a space for the backbeat, for the snare drum to kind of sound louder because there's nothing getting in the way. So here's a tricky thing about production that they did loads and loads of layers and tracks, but nothing gets in the way of the melody and the groove. That is really, really hard to achieve. I think that's one of the things. One thing I want to say about trying to catch up with the times for me is, again, Pour Some Sugar on Me was heavily inspired by that partnership of Aerosmith and Run DMC.
Oh, really? The Walk This Way?
Yeah, because of the vocals.
Quickly,
maybe
guys,
they want the vocals to be a bit like rap music. That's what they wanted.
I was just going to say, just a reminder that any song we mention will be in the dedicated playlist that we make, which is in the show notes below. So check out the show notes, find the link, and whenever we mention a song, if you haven't heard it, you can go along and check it out. But yes, sorry, Felipe, carry on, elaborate.
Yeah, so they were trying. I think they were trying to not sound like what was still in 1984.
Yeah.
So they were listening to whatever was going on MTV and all that stuff, and they've heard Run DMC playing with Aerosmith doing their version of Walk This Way, and they thought, we can do something like that. So that's why some of the vocals are more like spoken and everything. But one thing that I noticed as well, you might have noticed this, there's not a single fast song in the album.
No, there isn't.
They're actually medium slow tempos, which might be one of the reasons why the album kind of flows, and the songs feel connected.
Yeah.
So you never go too fast.
We spoke about this last week. For listeners and viewers, last week we spoke about Frampton Comes Alive, and we spoke about how the concert was fantastic, and it never took a dip because they didn't start with a high speed song and then go slow. All the songs kind of sit at the same tempo, so the energy just stays. And it's the same as you're saying with this album, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And some, I think, if we can talk about the songs like specifically, I think I like when the first song actually sets the tone for the album. And
it's quite understated, isn't it, for a heavy rock song?
Yeah,
it's not in your face. Whenever I think heavy rock song opening track, I think Highway Star, and I know we're 15 years later, but it's still an understated.
Yeah, when you listen to Women, isn't it the first one? Is that the first one?
Yes, it is.
You have. I mean, it's very 80s, the overall sound, and it's like big drums, loads of reverb, loads of space, and
synth
the repetitive riff. Yes, synth
bass as well.
Yeah, and the repetitive riff, which is not a bad thing when I say repetitive. It's just like it loops itself all the time. A slow tempo, strong BVs, like they're really, really loud in the mix. They really.
Can I just add to that? Atmospheric. I thought the production was brilliant. The atmosphere created by the sound effects and the little embellishments they were putting in the production was lovely. Yeah, please carry on.
Yeah, and I think the guitar solos, they've made really melodic choices for the solo. So there's no, as we usually say in the show, no guitar wanky vibes. It's like
guitars.
No wanky guitars. It's just like whatever the song needs. The solos are not long. Some of the songs are long because that's the concept of that time. You just repeat the chorus over and over and never ends. And you have that really, really slow fade out that actually almost never happens. It's just like, well, is it the end or not? But that happens throughout the album. But basically, the short solos, more melodic approach to the guitar playing. I think that's one of the things they did really well. I think there's not much ego in that kind of stuff. I think what they wanted is to be recognized as good songwriters and arrangers and a good band rather than individual talents. And I think that that's very clear in the way the album sounds.
Yeah, well, those kind of characteristics of wanting to be a good band, they come through the execution of songwriting. You know, songs on an album, isn't it? That's how you prove
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
I liked the track "Animal," track 3. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed the chorus of that. That's an example of the catchy kind of pre-chorus and chorus that we get throughout the album. And although we might have sort of sections where it feels a bit, what word can I use? Rocky. It feels a bit rock. It's not. We're venturing from pop into rock, and you might find that the vocals are more expressive. Maybe he's talking more or shouting as opposed to like singing a nice clean line. But then you kind of forget all of that the moment the pre-chorus and the chorus comes in, because once you've heard some of these choruses in this album, you just they're stuck in your head all day, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's so catchy. I
They
dare
are
you guys
catchy.
to try and get them out of your head.
Yeah, and also some of the lyrics, they are the kind of material that Spinal Tap was mocking, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's that kind of stuff that
This one's called "Lick My Love Pump."
That could be one of their lyrics. It would be just perfect.
Yeah,
I think. I'm not quite sure about it, but maybe Spinal Tap was highly influenced by them.
you never know. You never know.
Yeah, you never know, because it's that kind of. So maybe the lyrics and maybe some of the sounds, they like too much 80s for my taste. But
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything bad about it. It's just like it reflects the time when the recording started rather than when it was released. But still, still there's like there's an artistic value to everything they did, because they were so careful. This idea of never accepting an average result and aiming for high quality in everything, it can really be noticed throughout the whole album. If you listen to every song and every bar, there's nothing meaningless in that.
No,
So,
and I think there was such a massive sense of unity within this band on the playing of the album. You can hear they're tight, and when we think glam metal, for me, my mind, I'm very linear with things. I have things organized categorically in my head. So when I hear the words glam metal, my first thought is 1978 Van Halen 1. We've done that episode before.
Yeah.
We've done that album. So for new viewers and listeners, go back and check out that episode, because that was a good one. We enjoyed that one, didn't we?
yeah.
I think Van Halen 1, because that was the album that kind of got glam metal going. It showed that you could incorporate accessible poppy backing vocals with accessible melodies and lyrics and easygoing songs with crazy shredding guitar solos, heavy metal rhythms in places. And it really showed you could do that. And essentially, glam metal was born because of that. So when I compare it to the likes of Van Halen 1, it does, in some categories, it falls short. It's not as heavy as Van Halen 1. It doesn't have those moments where you think, oh, this is almost a metal song. Although there were metal sections in some of these songs, I never came away from a song thinking, yeah, that's the heaviest song on the album. But what it does expand on, and what I think you agree with, is the backing vocals on it are just fantastic. So one thing I didn't do was introduce the band, so I'm going to introduce them. Yeah. Take note of something. Vocals, Joe Elliott. Guitars and backing vocals, Phil Collen. Guitars and backing vocals, Steve Clark. Bass and backing vocals, Rick Savage. Drums and backing vocals, Rick Allen. So they're all vocalists, put it that way. They're all vocalists, and you can hear it, because throughout the whole album, despite my opinion, your opinion, his opinion, how poppy it might be, how accessible, you have got some stunning harmonic work there with the vocals beautifully layered to represent the chord that they want to sing in a really lovely way. It works, doesn't it?
With excessive levels of reverb.
As well, yeah. But that's, but throughout nearly every song, isn't it, just backing vocal galore?
Yeah, it is, and I think they kind of, maybe that's why the drums and the bass are so simple. When I say simple, I never mean that they are easy to play or anything like that, but they're simple parts. They keep the groove going because the guitars are doing different stuff every time, and the vocals, basically there's too many tracks of guitars and vocals all the time. So drums and bass, they are really the foundation, which is normally what it is supposed to be. But in heavy metal, sometimes you might have some overplaying on the bass and drums, and it works. But that's one of the things that make this album less heavy metal and more pop or hard rock or glam, whatever you want to call it, is the groove is more simple and solid, whilst all the excessive amount of stuff going on comes from guitars and vocals. And there's an interesting story about Love Bites, which is another huge hit from the album. Phil Collins said that they had so many guitar parts in it, and they never actually played it together as a band rehearsing. So it was a pure studio song. So they did layer by layer, adding stuff, and the song made it to #1, and what I think was their first #1. And they in Vancouver in Canada, getting ready to play or getting ready for the tour.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we kind of have to learn the song because they had to make a lot of choices to decide what to play live. If we have 15 guitars in a song, which parts are you going to play? Which parts are you going to drop to make it sound as close as possible to the original version? So they booked a studio and they rehearsed that song for 2 days because they were ready for the gig, but not for that song. And the song made it to #1. They're like, well, what the hell do we do now? We can't play our own song.
God.
Which is similar to what happened to Queen with Bohemian Rhapsody, wasn't it? They recorded it. It was like, now we need to learn this thing. It's really complicated.
And then they just said, fuck it, with that opera part, we'll just leave it. We'll just play it on track. One thing I wanted to draw attention to that you just mentioned was some of the production effects and, production techniques. Now, there's something here that I was reading called the Mutt-Lange method. Did you read about this?
No.
No, right. So check this out, okay? The Mutt-Lange method included this. So Felipe just mentioned about stacking up layers of 15 guitars or whatever. In this album, this is how extensive and how deep they went. Mutt-Lange would get them to tune one string of a guitar, okay? Yeah. And they play the note and record it. So imagine you're playing a G chord. I've
heard of that.
But
I didn't understand
for
the whole
non-musical listeners, okay, a G chord contains the notes G, B, and D, all right? G major. They tune one of the strings to G and they play the rhythm. Da-da-da-da-da, G. Right, next, let's find a B. Is that a B? Is that one string at a time? Is that a B? Is that perfect? Yep. Da-da-da-da-da. Great, recorded. D. String by string. Can you believe it?
They build the chord one string at a time.
One string at a time. Perfectly tuned.
Yeah.
But
I read about it and I thought it was like this. I thought it was a joke or something.
I followed up and it is apparently true. Yeah. And what that does is provides an incredible level of detail, technicality. I think on with bands, let's think about bands we mentioned, and within their first 4 albums, Queen, AC/DC. I think those bands at this point of their career had the attitude, the vibe, the rock and rollness to not care so much about the tuning of a guitar. Obviously, if they could, they would make sure it's in tune, without a doubt. But if something went wrong and that was the only take they got, they wouldn't have scrapped the whole song and said, we need to start again because this is out of tune. Sometimes there is a bit of musical freedom with notes being slightly out of tune. I can't say there's any one song I know by a famous rock band where, that note's out of tune. But there is a little looseness, a little rock and rollness with bands who just play it a bit loose, a bit easy. But this is another level of detail, isn't it?
Yes, this is like extreme. But I think in music production and songwriting, perfectionism pays off.
Well,
I think
it has its place.
It does. Yeah. And you might think that that kind of approach belongs to classical music or prog rock or jazz or anything that's complicated and stuff. But you can do cheesy pop songs for the radio and for the masses with a high level of creativity, production, and detail. And I think that's the best. Maybe if I have to say what I like the most about the album, is this attention to detail.
Well, everything is there with a reason, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is nothing there that is not meant to be there. You know.
Yeah.
Is there anything, any other songs you wanted to mention or specific aspects or anything? I mean, personally, in terms of catchy choruses, I really loved Armageddon It.
Yeah.
Don't Shoot Shotgun. Thought that was good. The Hysteria song. Again,
Armageddon It is
almost,
my favorite. It's my favorite opening riff for sure.
yeah, I think I'd agree. Yeah,
I think
it's
Armageddon
probably...
It is, for me, is if AC/DC was a pop band, that would be it.
That's a
Yeah.
fair comparison.
Yeah.
I actually listened to the first song of their last album, just for a bit of comparison. I thought that was quite AC/DC-esque as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of like very simple drums and bass, a guitar, just playing simple chords going on with a nice melody and a nice hook.
And you
Yeah,
have some classic stuff. Yeah, well, to be honest, like "Pour Some Sugar on Me" is one of my favorites. Is that I think the drum beat and the chorus and I've played that song live with a pop band once.
It is the definition of a classic rock song.
Yes, you get everyone singing along, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that song, right?" And they sing along with it.
Upbeat,
I don't
anthemic
think
chorus. It's got everything, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if that would be my favorite. Love Bites is great, but I think Armageddon is my favorite for, it's just so silly in a good way. I actually did like this big surprise for me was Run Riot, because that is the closest they got to punk.
And metal as well, I'd put in that sentence, because in the bridge, he's got that quite dark, heavy metal riff.
But it's the darkest one in the album, probably the heaviest. I don't know.
I'd agree.
The most distorted.
Yeah.
So that's a good surprise. That's a good surprise. That was probably my second favorite, I would say.
Yeah.
As an album, I think I like it. As I didn't fall in love with the album. I didn't know this album. I knew some of the singles, and I'm not familiar with Def Leppard for some reason. I should be. They're such a huge band. But
this is my first. This is my first introduction to Def Leppard. Obviously, I've heard them. I've heard the hits. But in terms of doing a full album, this is my first one as well.
Yeah, it's the first time I've listened to one of the albums start to finish, and it surprised me the overall quality. And again. We said this about most of the albums we picked. There's no fillers in that sense. I mean, I think it's not. You might, for my taste, there's nothing exceptional for the kind of stuff I like listening to. But putting into context the songs, the fact that you have 7 singles in an album.
It's like whether you like them or whether you like this kind of music or not, the songs are all of the same quality.
Yeah, and they were quite brave to come from a heavy metal album into this, right? That is not a that could have been the end of their career, and it had the opposite effect. So,
and it's lucky, man, because like I said, glam was dying out, and people were kind of not taking it so seriously anymore. They got in right at the end. Just before glam would have a few more years.
The last
like
breath
of glam kind of towards the end of the 80s, glam started changing from being all glammy and weird to a bit more serious, like dirty hair metal bands like Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, But yeah, so now I just wanted to talk about the significance of the album and what generally the consensus is on why it's so good. So I've got a few reasons here. One thing I actually haven't mentioned that I'll touch on now is the music videos. Because the music videos for these songs, I've only seen a few of them, but generally they're just visually striking. Think about Pour Some Sugar on Me and Love Bites. These were released in conjunction with the rise of MTV. Or maybe not the rise, maybe it was already established by then. But music videos were becoming important things, and Def Leppard definitely nailed the music videos for this album, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, they had all the elements, all the extravaganza of the 80s. And it's like their music is quite visual, if that makes any sense. We listen to it. It's like I can hear the colors.
I can visualize what the music video would be if I was listening to Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So we've already mentioned the critical success, the economic success in terms of 20 million albums sold, 12 million in the US alone.
Yeah.
Let's just think about that for a second. 12 million albums sold in the US by a UK band. That's something, isn't it? That's pretty nuts. Now, chart success. Check these out, right? Number 1 in Australia, Finland, Norway, New Zealand, UK, and the USA. Number 2 in Sweden and Switzerland. Across the world, man. Across the world.
Different
Not Europe,
cultures, different
Europe,
backgrounds.
different like New Zealand.
Yeah.
You know, like, wow. So it's almost like a Def Leppard fan shouldn't care, and I don't care about my opinion, because you've got to look at that and say they did something right, didn't they? Like, you know, whether I like it or not.
Well, for a guy with his Slayer T-shirt, Laz, for people who are only listening, he's wearing a Slayer T-shirt. For a guy wearing Slayer to praise Def Leppard, that is. I mean, what an achievement, that album. They were like under huge pressure because they did a great album, and you know, they could have just done more of the same, and they went in a different direction. And that's brave. And I think that's what rock and roll is all about. It's like, this is what we believe is going to be the next big thing, and we want to do it, and we want to make it as good as possible. If we need to sack the producer and get the other guy back, we're going to do this, do that, and keep working on the songs. And if you write a song right at the end of the process, and you're about to finish the album, but we've got one new good song, we're going to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
And they did all of that. So yeah,
it takes a lot to have your roots in a certain kind of music. You know, we know Def Leppard came from the heavy metal kind of background / hard rock. They basically sacrificed those elements of their music in this album, didn't they? I feel like that. I feel like they said, right, we're not going to do metal riffs anymore. We're not going to go ultra hard rock on the production riffs and rhythms. We're going to swap those in. And I think, like you said, this is actually a good comparison to Fleetwood Mac, who did the same thing with the Rumours album, which again we've done a video on. So go back and check that one out.
Yeah, the one thing I don't understand is when people get really, really frustrated. Oh, the band has changed, and they're doing something different now. I don't like it. I prefer the other album. It's like the other album is still there. Go and listen to it. When the band changes completely, imagine. So just if you want to, I'll give those people a good strategy for that kind of stuff to make you feel better. Imagine that the band you love, they decided to split after the album you love the most, and they no longer exist. That's it. So you listen to everything that's been produced until that point, and you ignore everything that comes after that. Just pretend it's another band, it's a new pop band that you hate,
that's how you
don't have to listen to. So I welcome every sort of experimentation and changes that any band can do, even if they go in a direction that doesn't quite work or I don't like. It's like, well, at least people are trying to do something different. And I think that's rock and roll, isn't it? Rock and roll is like, go there and do whatever you feel like you should do, not what your label's telling you to do, not what your own fans are telling you to do.
We're trying to sneak it into every episode, but I will reiterate the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast motto, which is rock and roll is musical freedom. And we've seen a band experiment with their freedom here. So why the hell not?
And achieving success,
One other category of significance I thought was important was the cultural impact, because it definitely, although to some people like me it might sound a bit outdated, it definitely holds the cultural significance that the early 80s had. The outfits, the big hair, the anthemic choruses, the kind of over-the-top production and polishedness of it. It does sort of really significantly represent the 80s. And I think that's a nice thing, because like you said, they started the album in 84 and they didn't release it to 87. So there's going to be things from 3 years earlier that we're in that are still worth keeping in.
Still doesn't beat Chinese democracy, does it?
No, exactly.
How long was that? The Guns N' Roses album was it like 13 years in the make
something
or something?
Crazy.
Something like that.
$1 billion? Did I get that out of nowhere?
Is that billion? Can't be.
It was something crazy, isn't it? Some crazy.
Yeah, and
number.
It took over a decade to finish. And it's like, it's not that great, in my opinion. It's good, but it's not that great. It's like if someone tells me I'm going to tell you the funniest joke ever, and they tell me after 10 years, and it's not. It's just like, kind of funny,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to be really disappointed. That's
I,
but
I did get that wrong.
3 years and what?
Yeah, 13 million. So not anywhere close to a billion, but
13
still
million. And how many years in the make?
How long did it take to make? So 14 years.
14 years.
It's 1 million a year, bro.
So comparing to Chinese democracy, Hysteria was kind of okay. Only 3
Exactly,
years. Come on, it's not that long. Also, you got to understand a car crash in the middle.
That's the last part I was going to bring to, which I want to ask you about and talk to you about. The resilience, the strength, the emotional courage it takes for a band. I mean, it's not a small deal that the drummer has lost his arm.
Yeah.
It's a big, big hit when a band's producer leaves, because you've gone in with an idea. You know, you can attest this. We've been in the studio together professionally. You've gone in with an idea in mind of how the band and how this specific producer is going to help you tailor your sound, record your instruments to get the best results. To have Mutt Lange leave, that's a big enough issue. To have Jim Steinman come in and change how things were supposedly meant to go, that's another big issue. To have that guy leave months later with not much done on the tracks is the third biggest issue. Follow that up with the drummer losing his arm.
Yeah. And then you have to pretty much restructure the whole way you record drums, because it went from acoustic to electronic.
Great point.
And
you have to
so
take
you change
all
the concept,
of those,
the sound and everything. Yeah.
You have to take all of those things into account, deal with them. Think about the rehabilitation he must have had to go through. All of that over the course of years, whilst the rest of the band are still writing, still thinking, what can we do for this album? And then finally, when he's back, not to overwork him, to give him the time he needs, but you still want to get to a deadline. I just think it must be, in terms of attitude, massive, massive props to the band. All of them, I'm not saying the other four guys for dealing with Rick's injury. All of them, they all went through, or it seems they went through so much in those 3 years. And again, despite my opinions on it, to produce an album as clean and fantastically executed as this is a remarkable achievement, I think.
It is. And again, I think a true band would do what they did, which is like, let's wait until our drummer is ready to get back on track, and let's carry on. Let's rock and roll. Like this, music is bigger than the musicians, and they wanted to keep going and get to the end of it, and that's amazing. Excellent. Yeah. So I know we're approaching the end. So
yes, go for it.
And I know you have a monologue, but I have my own.
Yeah, I like that we're making this a regular thing. Let's do the monologues in 1 second. I'm just going to list some of the accolades.
Yeah.
We've done the number ones and everything. Just check this out, okay?
Yeah.
Rock Hard, the magazine, 500 greatest rock and metal albums of all time. They gave this one number 464. Rock Hard's greatest hair metal albums of all time, number 1. Loudwire's greatest hair metal albums of all time, number 2. Metal Rule's top 50 glam metal albums, number 30. It is a very respected album. And I think we've done enough over the last 45 minutes to show that actually it's an album that hasn't wowed you or me. We haven't sat there being like, oh, this is the best stuff we've ever heard. But we can sure as hell appreciate what is going on deep in the album, the songwriting, the lyrics, the mix. It's brilliant without me enjoying it. I don't think I've ever said those words.
Well, you can appreciate the craft, isn't it, behind that?
Absolutely.
And I think I'm really glad you suggested this one, because I wasn't familiar with any of their albums, like start to finish.
Yeah.
This one is so relevant for the history of rock music that it would be a shame if I never listened to it. So really cool. And
excellent. Let's all right. Let's wrap things up. We're going to start with Felipe's monologue.
Okay, here I go. Written and recorded during turbulent times, Hysteria is a masterpiece from the 80s. It combines elements from every subgenre of rock music that has been produced up to that point in time. Never too heavy, never too fast, the album flows from hit to hit with a good balance between cheesy lyrics, strong vocal harmonies, and clever arrangements. Def Leppard gave their incredibly talented producer the freedom of joining them on every step of the journey, writing songs and challenging the band to achieve greatness through hard work and commitment. Personal tragedies and pressure to repeat their previous achievements have added to the chaos that seemed to have forced the band to try harder than ever before, resulting in an extremely successful record that has survived the 80s and found its place in rock history. It's ambitious as a concept, but fun and enjoyable as rock music should be.
Brilliant, bro. I love this. I love that we're both doing a monologue now. That's so cool. Yeah, that was lovely, man. Great points. You focused on all the positives of the album and what's so good about it. Yeah, awesome. Shall I do mine now?
Yes.
Okay. To steal and adapt a quote from a character from the US version of The Office. Just to say the UK version is far superior. But anyway, here's the quote. Everyone knows that. It's rock for those who don't like rock. It's pop for those who don't like pop. And it's metal for those who don't like metal. That's the best way I could describe this album. Excuse me. I don't like it very much, but that's not to say it doesn't have its moments, and it most certainly is a very good album in its own standing. My main issue is that I don't like how equally it sits in its subgenres. It's too heavy to be a pop album, too accessible and poppy to be a rock album, and far too produced and synthetic to be a metal album. For this reason, I end up only enjoying moments of songs, a chorus here, a heavy riff there, a guitar solo there, because when I come across something I like, it's usually followed by a section that I equally dislike. This album just feels to me like it's in multiple camps, and it doesn't have any real identity, taking some aspects from Glam's recent success, sparsely mixing in elements of their heavier / metal background, and also then realizing that there is money to be made with the appeal and accessibility of pop music. Whilst I usually celebrate when bands mix these styles, I just feel that they've taken the worst parts of each of these subgenres and stuck them together. Again, just my opinion. However, whilst on this show we are very forthcoming with our opinions and we're not afraid to share them, are we, Felipe? The guitar work and musical precision is we must also remember that we cannot like every album, and I think it's our responsibility to offer an unbiased view. The catchy choruses are very memorable and stick in your head. The guitar work and musical precision is something to be celebrated, as the melodic and harmonic work is very good and works fantastically. The backing vocals are exquisitely organized and structured, and the production of the whole thing is just top-notch. The patience they must have had in order to face their adverse circumstances is something to praise them for, and to take their time and not rush the prep, the recording, the execution of the album is something, again, we must applaud. To face the news of a drummer losing his arm, producers bowing out of projects is really tough, but to still continue on in the same fashion with a clear vision and goal of what you want to produce and it being considered a massive success by your fans is an admirable feat.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. We've summed the album up in 2 monologues, haven't we? I love this. You've got to keep doing monologues, bro, because I love that, because we end up getting 2 sides, just like the whole point of this podcast. You know, we've got 2 different opinions from 2 people of different ages, different instruments, different cultures, and it always brings us back that just
I like to think that my view of most albums is more positive all the time, because I'm like, that's rock and roll, I love everything.
Exactly.
And Laz is really harsh. Laz is the guy who would rewrite Stairway to Heaven because he doesn't like the last bar of the song. But,
I wouldn't rewrite all of it, just the end.
Just the end. Yeah,
go back to one of the first 3 episodes.
A friend of mine said that. Yeah, so a friend of mine said that you would fix the Mona Lisa if you could, isn't it?
What did he say? Yeah, I'd do her right eye a little bit higher or something, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, with that, we will bow out for this week. Thank you again for joining us. We are the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us. As we mentioned, I'll keep it short and quick. Please do all you can to give us a like, a comment, a subscribe on any of the social media stuff you see. Any interaction really helps us be seen by more people on the social media platforms. And if you're listening to us over Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon or Google, any review you give us, even if it's one more, they start saying, "Oh, people have seen this now. They're rating it. Let's move it up the charts." And now, instead of having searched "Long Live Rock and Roll" to find us, they search rock and roll. They search Def Leppard. And then we get shown in the charts and we move up and up, and all we want to do is grow. We're an independent podcast. We do this all off our own backs. We do it because we love the music. So we hope, with that in mind and with this episode, that you'll join us next time.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this 200 years after it has been recorded, so you can find us on the internet.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever the internet has become.
You imagine? That's a conversation for another day. Anyway. Felipe,
Okay,
that's your
guys.
cue. That's your
my
cue.
cue. You
Yeah.
said he said anyway, and I was
Yeah.
meant to say my cue. So keep on rocking, everyone.
Fantastic. It took, 58 episodes for you to forget your cue. I'm really proud of you because he is a bit forgetful.
I didn't forget the line. I didn't get the cue. That was it. It's like, is this the end? Is that it? Am I supposed to say it? Keep on rocking, everyone. I'll say it again. Keep on rocking, everyone.
Isn't this what rock and roll's about, man? It's about, if you make a mistake live, as we know plenty of times during gigs, you just roll with it, you have a laugh, and you get on with it. But thank you, sir, for your cue. I will end with mine. Take care, guys, and as usual, long live rock and roll.